why not? Oh, I hit the right button. We're live. It's me, Kyler Collom. Jonathan Starr's out of town. Welcome to Thursday's edition of ND Talk. I'm joined by special guest, former Mayor Shaun Sipma.
Hey, good morning.
How you doing, Shaun?
I'm doing fantastic. The sun is shining, as they say in North Dakota. The wind isn't blowing 50 miles an hour springtime, so it's a great day.
It's beautiful out. We got some rain yesterday, a little like thunder.
Yeah, a little bit of thunder. I think that's the first official thunder.
I think so.
Light thunderstorm. I don't even shower.
I bet Tom Schrader was living it up last night.
You know, we joked years ago when we worked together that, you know, that is the summer storm season was the best time of his life. He lived for it.
Especially with the storm chasing stuff that's going on now. I bet that is something that he is all for.
Absolutely.
You know, I think we're live. We have all of the audio working, Shaun. I didn't mess up this time. It's a good day. Jonathan will be proud. Couple little things before we really dive in. Did you see the Roosevelt Park's going to close down?
Yeah.
Or the pool, excuse me, the pool.
The pool itself.
Yeah,
I think they're going to keep the pickleball courts open. But
yeah.
I guess I wasn't horribly surprised at the differentiation, looking at the proximity of construction, young kids, all of that stuff. Yeah. It really stinks for the community. I mean, there's no two ways around it. I'm sure a lot of people disappointed, but it also shows the asset that is and what we're trying to protect.
Exactly. And it's one of those deals with the way it kind of works in the grand scheme of things. It should be a minor inconvenience for a long time, kind of bigger project. Yep. And I don't know, unfortunate for the people with kids, but that's probably not the biggest story in Minot going on right now.
I think there's a few other things going on.
There's been some big stuff happening in town lately.
Absolutely.
Obviously, the Nicole Rice, Anita Knutson trial happened not long ago. I'm sure you followed that. And
I did. Yeah. I was actually covering back in 2007 the
original.
The Mo Gibbs trial for murdering Mindy Morgenstern in Minot. It got moved from Valley City to Minot. So I was reporting on that trial, and then that murder of Anita Knutson happened during that trial. And I remember that there was quite a bit of discussion, you know, if that happened because of, and that really never got brought out, and it wasn't, obviously.
Yeah.
But no, I reported on that for a very long time and was very interested to see how all of that shook out. And as they say, it is what it is.
Yeah. My again, before we dive off of it, my biggest thing, as I've already said, it just feels like this is something that probably could have gotten done like 10 years ago.
It is.
Like the TV show obviously propelled it, but it just feels like this is...
Yeah, you take a look at all of the factors, and I know that the media has talked a lot about that, and we were just coming into the boom time of the community, and absolutely some things could have been done different. Everybody can Monday morning quarterback everything.
Exactly.
I think things absolutely could have been done differently, but they are what they are, and we had to deal with them as they happen. So, as the old adage goes, you have to learn from what happened. You take a look at history and make sure that if there were mistakes, and clearly there were some things that could have been and should have been done different, you have to learn from those and make sure they never happen again.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, something we didn't necessarily have to talk about, but I think that's part of where the Minot Police Department's going right now.
Absolutely.
It really feels like they're building off of some of the, obviously they've had a really tumultuous last, not just like 6 months, but 2 years, and I really think this is starting to push them towards the future.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I did want to actually just point out there's, you know, during the trial, they were talking about this deep corruption within the police department. That's BS. So if the attorneys are watching, one shame on you. There's a lot of great police officers on our force who do a tremendous amount for our community. Yeah. So I know that there's challenges and improvements that need to happen, but my heart is still, I've got my blue light out in front of my house.
Good. That's fantastic. And again, having read through that report in full that they referenced that came out right prior to the hearing starting, it just because it references one of the detectives that was involved in the Knutson case in the retrial part of it. That's the only reason it got brought up, and it's completely irrelevant to the actual murder.
Yep, absolutely. But the defense attorneys, their job is to create reasonable doubt.
And they did a phenomenal job with that. There's no doubt about that. And speaking of Minot, vaguely, sounds like there's going to be a special election to fill the mayoral seat coming up this summer.
Yeah, special election. I was watching, I was at the city council meeting early for Leif Schneider for that proclamation. And I want to thank acting mayor, former President Janser. We talked about all the different names, but for that.
It's been called everything in the book at this stage.
Yeah. Special election. I was really hoping that we were going to hit the easy button on this one. The easy button would have been appointing Janser to that position, and we can certainly talk about that, the why into that, and saving the taxpayers anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000, and then working this forward, moving on and healing. But sometimes the community likes to drag out drama, and we've seen that play out in social media a lot.
Yeah, that's one thing that really, I think Minot, maybe not Minot specifically, but media in general loves to just hone in on anything that incites any kind of drama into it. And so with the petition having been filed, if they got 500 signatures, like they said, it's the odds of it not being verified are minimal. So it sounds like the earliest the election date could be would be July 20th.
There was a media report this morning, not that I was paying attention, but there was. So it has been verified that the number of signatures have been verified by the city. So there will be a special election, and it has to happen after the June election that's coming up because of the timing. Yeah,
there's going to be that special election in June for a possible sales tax increase in town. That'll be going to the Park District. We're going to be following that along closely. Hopefully we see some good turnout for that, but we'll deal with that one when it comes. And on top of that, I really look forward to kind of getting into the actual date. They have July 20th being the earliest, which that's a Sunday. I don't think they're going to have it on a Sunday.
No, and they typically try to get those during the week.
Yeah, so July 22nd is a Tuesday, but you know what's going on during that week?
Oh, North Dakota State Fair.
Yeah. Do you think that they would put it during the state fair? I mean, I guess never say never, but it feels like...
never, but I think the sooner that they have it, I mean, we may have to call it for what it is. I think that's the perfect segue into, we've had horrendous turnout for voters.
Yeah.
Dating back, I think we were talking about this beforehand, dating back to 2010.
Yeah. Numbers up to from 2010 to on are pretty easy to find. Before then, you just have to start downloading some stuff. Not like it's that much harder, but it's there. So just to go back, obviously 2022, the last one, in the city of Minot, there was 44,577 total votes cast out of 37,377 eligible voters. That's 12.25%. Yeah.
Shameful. Yeah. What that means to me is almost 90% of the community didn't care enough to show up and vote, didn't do their constitutional duty to go out and vote. This is not sour grapes. My wife and I are actually quite pleased that I am not the mayor right now.
It worked out. Silver linings, right?
Yeah. So, but the point, though, is you take a look at the people that choose not to vote, and it is absolutely shameful. That's the only way I can put it. There's a lot of people that have fought and continued to fight for our freedoms, and I will stand behind that. That's my constitutional duty. That's everybody's constitutional duty, especially to vote for who you want as your local elected officials. And if that wasn't evident on why that's important, last Tuesday showed why that's important.
Yeah, undoubtedly so. We're now going to have to move forward and get another special election going. It's not just the off midterm year, it's a complete off election year for North Dakota. So, I mean,
and those turnouts are never great.
No, and they're not great because I have the full numbers here. They're not great for, you just compare a general election year to a off election year when it's on a presidential term, and the numbers are pretty much in half. So in 2022, in just, Ward County, you had out of 51,000 effectively eligible ballots, there was 6,400 people, almost 6,500 people that voted, a hair under 13%. You look at 2024 in this Ward County, you had 8,400 out of 53,000. So you're up to about 17% there. I mean, it's still not a lot, but it's just, it's a noticeable difference at that time.
Absolutely. And most of that is driven by who's running in those circumstances for president or for the position of governor or one of those big seats that draws people out.
Yeah.
But even with those big elections, those numbers are not good.
No, I mean, we can go back further to prior to Minot's realignment of the city council. Like you go back and look at 2010 and 14 when it was Kurt Zimmelman running for the last time and then Chuck Barney. Both of them technically ran unopposed. Zimmelman in 2010, there was a total of 3,220 votes, which is it's under 10% of the population at that time, depending on what the estimates are. And then you look at 2014 when Chuck Barney ran against a write-in candidate. It was a total of 2,300 votes. So 6.2% of Minot voted that year. It's unfortunate.
So that goes back to a lot of the people that have been on. I'm just going to call it out Whiners and Complainers page. Not a fan of the page, but that goes back to what some of them have been saying. Our voices need to be heard. How can you say our voices need to be heard when we're talking about those kind of numbers? And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a special election. If people want a special election, let's do it. Clearly, we are.
Yeah.
But we have 90%, 88% of the people that aren't letting their voices be heard.
That's the thing. So if
it's tough. It's tough to take that without being a little bit of cynicism.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to. So if they're pushing for the special election like this, they should also be pushing as hard to get people out to vote for it.
Absolutely.
Like they should be
going door to door. They should be out there basically campaigning to vote.
Because looking at it in depth, there was a couple of petitions that were circulating. It sounds like there was one that was kind of from the page, yeah. And then there was another from Mr. Royce who ended up submitting it and also declared his intention to run. So obviously with his petition, he planned to run with it. I wonder with the Page's petition if they had anyone in mind to run or if they just wanted to have the election.
I think it's like that throwing something against the wall to see if it sticks. And that's the mob mentality of no plan, but we're going to scream and yell and see what happens. Well, that doesn't work. Clearly it doesn't work. Now it's going to be the step forward on how many candidates step forward to get their 296 signatures. That's what it's going to take to get on the ballot. Again, just amazingly low number, all things considered. But
it's crazy but the numbers make sense when you look at the century code, why they get them. But it shouldn't be that low.
It shouldn't be that low.
That's
just
the
for people that should be showing up to vote.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how many people hand in petitions. I'm hoping, and I'll be the first to say, I'm hoping that acting Mayor Janser is one of them, and that the council itself somewhat unifies in saying, you know what, we've got an individual who not only has been serving since 2008 on the council, so he's got a lot of working knowledge on city government, not only from the previous form, but to where they're at now, what the council is at now, but the community relationships. And on top of that, you couldn't ask for somebody who is more even-keeled, someone who does not invoke any kind of idea of let's call it chaos.
Sure, yeah. It's a sense of calm.
Sure,
yeah.
A sense of calm. As I say this with full respect, and I will tell him this the next time I see him. Minot right now needs someone who is that calming presence. Needs somebody like a Mr. Rogers.
That's perfect. A nice, soft-spoken,
but is also a leader.
Yeah,
and he's got all of that, including the long-standing ties with Minot Air Force Base and the rest of the community partners. So
massive into Task Force 21. Obviously, that's one of his biggest featured things that he's been a part of.
Served the community for so long, and and keep in mind too, we're talking about 10 months.
Yeah,
by the time the election and the seating happens, we're talking 10 months.
Yep. And so I don't think I'd be doing my job if I didn't ask this follow-up. With that heavy endorsement, I assume you probably don't plan to run yourself then.
I will tell you the same thing that I've told everybody else. And first, I have to say thank you to anybody, lots of people that have reached out. I know that number is between the phone calls, text messages, and other social media messaging. One, thank you for reaching out. Two, I'm not going to be, and I will say the reason is when I was in office, obviously we literally got everything done that I said that we set out to do. We set out to do, but I was a tad bit contentious. That's not what this community needs right now. We need somebody who is calming. We need somebody who is just going to steer things with calm waters. And I'm definitely not that person right now. And like I tell my wife, somewhere along the line in the last couple of years. I've lost my filter has diminished, and you need to have that,
especially as the mayor too. When you're the one that's leading these the discussions, you're the one that's facilitating everything, and you're the one that everyone that comes up to the podium in public appearances is addressing. Unfortunately, it's well, maybe not unfortunately. It's probably a good thing to have that filter.
Absolutely, and you take a look at all of the different public engagements. You're the front-facing person. I heard your counterpart yesterday on one of the podcasts talk about, things feel a little bit uneasy right now, and there's a little bit of that uncertainty within the community. I did want to highlight this today. How much has your life changed since last Tuesday? How much has been impacted since last Tuesday?
Me personally, at the Dakota,
you've had a lot more to do.
Yeah.
But in terms of the municipality side of it, it hasn't changed
nothing at all.
The reason that is we've got a great city manager. We've got great city staff that are making sure that the operations are continuing. There's no question that if you were to call the police department right now, the fire department, or the city to get a water main break, that stuff's going to be taken care of.
Undoubtedly.
And it will continue to be. I think the challenge is just kind of that built-in uncertainty that the person that was at the helm is no longer there. However, we do have somebody, like we just talked about, who has all of those capabilities and more to finish that out. So let go of the drama. I'm not saying this to you, but
no, in general, yes, to the populace.
That's the way I've kind of looked at it, to where we're going to get through this.
Yeah, of course. And Minot has in the past. We've had mayors resign before. We've had Thomas Lee. We've had Art LeSueur back in the early 20th century resign in the past. I mean, this is something that isn't completely unprecedented for Minot.
Overcoming adversity has been Minot's other critical, I think, one of their biggest assets.
Yeah, It's in its entire life at this point. Minot's lifespan has been
just in our short little time here. We're talking about terrain derailment. We're talking about a flood. The West Chem fire from '87. Any number of things that we as a community have come together. So I'm not concerned that we're not going to get through this, but I would like us to hit that easy button once. But
I don't think it helped when some of the stuff got picked up by the AP and went national last week.
Went international.
Yeah, exactly. The Daily Mail Australia. Unfortunately, that probably didn't help anything. But looking at it now, so there is a special election. We have at least one candidate. For a fact one of the city council members are going to run. If not, maybe 2 or 3. Who knows how it'll play out. But that means in the interim time, we're only going to have a 6-person city council through the bulk of the early budget stages. How's that going to impact? What would that have been like if you were on the council and there was only 6 of you at that stage?
Well, when I was on council or when I was in the position of mayor, I think Mark kind of laid it out pretty good here the other day. A lot of times there are votes that are close, but sometimes those votes are that, I just don't feel that way specifically. I know it's going to pass, so I'm going to vote that dissent number or that position anyway. It's probably going to put a little more onus on the members themselves to look at the greater good and maybe the agenda itself that they may have, or some of their constituents that they feel more closely tied to. Sometimes that may have to take a back seat, and if it's a lock 3-3, they're going to have to dig deep and take a look at that big picture on really, is it worth fighting over? I will use the example of when we were talking. I was at a city council meeting, and I got quite emotional myself over.
That was like a 5-hour-long city council meeting too.
Over the flood control, one of the phases in funding. Costs have been going up, and then one of the aldermen had spoken about, we're spending all this money. Could it be spent better elsewhere? And that's not a big picture view. That's sending a message down to Bismarck that we've got some people in this town that don't care about flood control anymore. I don't think that that's his true feeling over it, but he was saying it out loud to elicit reaction from his constituents. Sometimes you have to have a broader view and not try to be just controversial, and that's probably going to come into play. If there are these 3 votes, you're going to have to dig down and truly look at what's better for this community in the long run, and not just towing the line to say, I will not support this because I don't believe in inflationary costs or whatever it might be.
Whatever side it might fall on in that regard. And it's because there's potential it's going to happen. I mean, just calling it like it is, it's not a fully factionalized thing, but you've seen a couple of groups emerge in the city council over the last year. And lo and behold, the person that was the middle of him is no longer there. So there's a potential for some contentious stuff to arise. I can't imagine too much is going to end up happening. They're smart people. They're all good people. They're going to get through it without a doubt. But the potential is there now.
Well, and we take a look at the budget itself. I mean, it really gets into the brass tacks probably late August before we get into the first and second ratings. Right now, they're going to be working through budget priorities, and that I think is where we're going to see some of the contention. You're right. Whether it's infrastructure, police, fire, where those costs are, flood control. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of dollars that are tied up with that. We've got NAS.
Finally finishing up here quickly soon.
I hope so.
Fingers crossed.
It would be so good for that to be behind the community finally, but more importantly, to get the drinking water finally up here. I know we've heard so many times about the challenges of treating the aquifer water that we rely on, but there's a lot of other little programs then when we talk about the economic development that is funded through the Magic Fund that was voted on by the people and said they want a faceted economic development component within the community. And it's, I believe it's going to be those little areas. It's not going to have a tremendous impact on the entire budget, but it could have a tremendous impact on where we go as a community.
On some focuses and some specific points. There's a good possibility for that to end up arising. And again, hopefully it doesn't. And then we look ahead to that actual special election. So who knows who's going to win? If you have someone from the outside that wins, obviously you don't have to worry about this at that stage. You'll have a 7-person council. All the city council members will continue to hold their seats. Say someone from on council wins, all of a sudden now we're still in the same place. We have a vacated position.
Now we're into an appointment of a council person, and that absolutely should be the case, quick and direct, if that is the case, because we don't have. Why would for 5 or 6 months would we spend another big amount of money to
$15,000 to $25,000, whatever it might be, for someone that is going to get seated, and then because just looking off the top of my head, knowing the numbers, it would probably have, because I think that has to be 6 months prior to the next election anyways. So if it doesn't,
we'd be inside of that time frame.
Yeah. So unless it's like within a 1 week time frame, it probably won't even be able to happen.
Right.
And
I think this is probably the next big thing to highlight. If whoever is running, this is a point to the 10%, 12% that actually shows up and vote. This is the 90% or 88% that doesn't vote. Pay attention right now and take a look who's going to run. Last Tuesday showed why it's important to research. Take a look at what they've stepped forward, those individuals within the community themselves. Do they have leadership experience? Do they have any working knowledge of present and past within the community itself? Are there warning flags? Maybe take a look at those. Take a look at the character of the individual and not just what they stand for, but who they are. That should be one of the biggest deciding factors when you show up to vote. When you show up to vote.
When, not if. Exactly. We're going to speak it into existence this time.
Absolutely.
I want to see it happen. I mean, we tried last primary season, and we didn't have the reach we did then, so that's what I'm going with at this point.
Shout it loud, shout it as far as you can, and get as many people involved as we can. And, dating back to, so you were just talking about those numbers here a few moments ago about the people that showed up to vote. That was one of the efforts of the Make Minot. Some folks have said, well, it really wasn't successful. Well, take a look at the previous election before that, and we gained 10,000 voters since that time. Now, should the organization or the group of people continue to march that forward? Probably. Most of us that were the most active got then into city politics, and a tremendous amount of time tied up there. But I think that should be one of the messages for the people that are screaming for this special election. You should now be motivating people to go out and vote. And I mean everybody, not just like-minded, but it's time to get the masses out.
Yeah, because this is something that is for the people. It is done by the will of the voice of the people. So at this stage, we should try to get as close to a majority of the population, voting eligible population of Minot, to come out and vote. And again, this is something I've hammered on before. North Dakota has some of the easiest voting laws in the nation. Like, it's not hard to come vote. You don't have to
mail-in voting. You got pre-voting, and then day of.
And you don't have to register.
You're not going to be standing in line for hours the way they do in big cities. I think the longest I've ever stood in line was 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's maybe 15 to 20 for me, and it was still, that was voting early, and it was an actual line, and it was nice to see last fall. But I mean, regardless, it's something that is, you show up, you have a license that's valid with a valid address, you're good to go. That's all it takes. And hopefully we get some good numbers out.
This
to
is
see
where
it
my
happen.
filter falls off.
I know.
If you didn't vote, shut up. You don't have a right to complain. If you're not showing up to vote, you lost that point to complain.
Especially for this one too. This one is a little. It takes it to a further level with this. I mean, it's not just your normal primary election and the run of the mill thing. This is coming off the heels of a scandal that Minot hasn't had happen in quite a while, and on top of that, with the issues with the police department that are being resolved. But this is an important time. Like if this is, and again, it's only for 10 months. That's the other flip side of it. And then next, late winter, spring, we're going to do it all over again.
But take a look at what that position of mayor does entail.
Yeah.
Right now, I think
you would have a good idea on this.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of the legislature, and they're going through a lot of funding bills.
Yeah, which we're going to touch on some of the flood stuff in that in a little bit here.
That's critically important. But then that outward facing to not only our state folks, whether that's with the governor or with the legislators or with our congressional delegation, that's with our partners up at Minot Air Force Base, within the community partners themselves. They want to know that somebody of true character is there that represents the best of the community, that not only understands the community, but the priorities of the community, and then can communicate those well to all of our partners, and saying, you know what, we've had a little bit of a tough role, but we're continuing right along with it without any kind of stoppage. We've got the right people in the right places, and it's going to continue forward. That's what that position of mayor is going to require.
Such an advocate for Minot. Like that is one of the biggest roles, and that's a historical part of the role, because especially prior to the Make Minot campaign was really going on, the mayor only voted on in terms of a tie. So
and that's the only other power they truly had was the veto power.
Yeah. So prior to that, they were so much just the face of Minot that went around and shook hands. And now in the last decade, the mayor actually has. I mean, it's still it's not a high-powered mayor system, but it gives them a lot more of an actual say rather than just kind of facilitating. The mayor has the ability to lead through this process.
And that was really the intention, is when all of us were working that forward with the position of mayor, is that it was meant to be the front face, the biggest community advocate for the community itself. And I think that did do what it was purposed to do, and certainly having that vote and that voice with every single issue that comes before the council, I think is important, because it also shows where the mayor's priorities are. It's
which I think that's
an important component.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it too. It's why it's important for the mayor at this stage, especially, to not just be a facilitator and to be a leader and drive the conversation and discussion as well. Especially when because you're not voting in case it's a 7-7 tie. You're voting every time.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know where those priorities are for that leadership and for the rest of the council as well. 100%. That's understanding where, when the mayor is out talking with some of our community partners and taking those into consideration, everyone on council has their roles and their parts that they play. And oftentimes it is, and before too, the mayor certainly had those community connections, but now it is kind of emboldened to have those more direct liaison conversations.
It's because there's so much more of a driving force behind it now, rather than just being the guy, the face of the guy.
And a big reason on that too was, if you took a look at the other large cities in North Dakota, that was the role that the mayors were playing, especially down at the legislature with their community partners. And not to say that, Mayor Barney or Mayor Zimmelman, weren't doing that, but the other mayors had that higher level role, and that made an impact with the legislators. That had an impact with some of our different partners, and it was time for us to step up.
Do you think at this stage where it's at now, do you think this is a good spot for the mayor, or do you think that the mayor could even take on more responsibilities?
That's gonna have to be the big question. What you're talking about is going to a strong mayoral
effect,
style.
Which, if you haven't seen it, Jonathan did a great interview with acting mayor Mark Janser earlier this week. Make sure to check it out. They talked about this pretty in depth at that point too, and
There isn't a single other city in North Dakota that has that strong mayoral position. And for the fourth largest city to jump into that role, I think would be premature.
It would be a big leap.
It would be a very big leap. And then you get into the discussion of full-time politicians. I can't say that I would be in favor of that. I do know how much it takes and how much it costs you. And I'm not talking campaigning. I'm talking about the time taken away from work, the time that it impacts your work, and then the toll that it takes. However, I've stood strong on saying community service shouldn't always be easy.
That's fair.
There is...
You're signing up for it.
You're signing up for it, and then there is that sacrifice. You are sacrificing something because, one, you believe in it. Two, you believe that you can bring some assets and resources to the community to its benefit, not to your benefit, to its benefit.
Exactly.
And then once you've hit your point, which I, truly say in 2022, I had said that I was going to run again, and where my wife and I both agree, it was a benefit to our family that I didn't. That it takes a lot. So I'm more than happy where things played out.
I know last year when you were on our show, actually, fun fact, you were on the 3rd ever edition of our podcast. So thank you for being an early supporter. It was so early, we had a different set and I wasn't even on that show. So, but no, listening to your conversation with Jonathan at that point, and I think it still rings true, and it's just something to reiterate that on the minimum end, if you want to do it right, it's bare minimum a good 20 hours a week for that position, any of those positions. And if you want to do it right, it's pushing 40 hours in and of itself.
There's not a question. And there's going to be times where it's more than that. When you have, and I will use the example of Minot Air Force Base when we had some of the 4-star generals up, when we had the congressional delegations up. I was at that point the honorary commander with Colonel Walters, now Brigadier General Walters. Sure. Hey, Chewy, if you're seeing this, miss you, buddy. But there were meetings up at the Minot Air Force Base just to talk with those folks, let them know what part Minot plays, being a community partner. And, that week alone, I remember it was probably 50 hours, not only with the council duties, but then meeting with some of the Air Force folks when the Secretary of the Air Force was up, literally going up there, waiting for my opportunity to speak with her, because there was fluctuations that beyond, obviously, anyone's control. Then those trips back and forth to the legislature. It's very important. A lot of those legislators were very, one, impressed, two, also kind of beholden that if somebody is going to come up and really do the best job to advocate for the city, it's going to be the mayor. So that was one of my big priorities.
You're the face of the city.
Absolutely. And to be able to speak fluently, and that requires a good relationship, like with the Service River Joint Board. Those guys do a fantastic job. We did a lot of different, I think, times that we spoke. We collectively, I would take a portion, they would take a portion, and that really helped move things along collectively together, talking about NAWS and talking then about some of the other some of the different sessions just offline, behind the scenes chatting and advocating. So there's a lot of time, and that absolutely is an important component of it. But then just coming back to the community too, and representing where you can, and I hate to say it, cutting the ribbons, being at the events, it's showing that you are a part of the community.
It's as much of it is the, you get the generic photo op thing, but it's important too. It shows that you're there.
For the mayor to care, and to support the community and be there to advocate.
And because obviously there's an expectation you're going to be there, but there's not a requirement that they have to be there for most of those things.
One of the coolest, and just by chance, and then we can probably move off this. But when the Minot High boys and girls both won the state aid down in Bismarck, just by coincidence, I work for a company that does some sponsoring, but I got a phone call from not only my company, but the High School Activities Association. Normally we don't travel within the business to hit those tournaments, but they asked me because they figured Minot was going to be in the championship game. That was the day before. There was a good likelihood, but they asked me to come down, and I was at those games when both of them won, and was able to hand, as the mayor, the trophies for the state championships to both the boys and girls teams.
That's fun. That
was awesome. It was just circumstantial, but it meant a lot to those coaches and kids that the mayor just happened to be there from the city to be at the tournament.
In a different city, too. Like you're down in Bismarck doing it. That's fun. No, that is really cool. Before we move off, do you have any final little tidbits you want to touch on for the possible upcoming special election, the mayoral cycle, anything with that?
I think the main thing that I could probably focus on, and you can probably reinforce, is get to know the candidates. Let's take this serious. Do your research, and to people that just want to throw their hat in the ring, take it serious, because there is a tremendous amount of responsibility. The pay stinks. There's a lot of time, but there's a tremendous amount of responsibility. Now, this might be a gateway for somebody who truly wants to get involved.
Yeah.
I chose to spend 15 years researching the city council, following it, and then spent a couple of years on city council, and then became mayor. I'm not going to say that has to be the route that everybody takes.
For sure.
But I think that whoever is in that position had better. And like I said, my vote's for Mark. But for somebody else who is putting their foot forward, take it very serious. This is not just something to be taken lightly and thinking that you're going to come in because the mayor does not have absolute power. You are a voice of one of that seven on council.
Yep.
So,
and
food for thought.
Beware, if you do end up getting into the race, you'll be getting an interview request from us. So you'll have to deal with Jonathan on that one.
Sit right here.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll also hopefully be hosting some kind of debate in that cycle, assuming that it ends up happening. So be ready for that.
We know there's going to be more than one candidate in at least two.
Yeah. Their bare minimum, there's going to be there's going to be two candidates. There's no way there doesn't, and it could end up being 3, 4, 5. Who knows?
Absolutely.
So be ready. If you are running, we will be having that out there. Real fast, we're going to go to an ad, and then we're going to come back, talk about some flood control and some other statewide stuff.
In the demanding world of oil and gas, precision, safety, and efficiency are non-negotiable. Unmanned operator drone services revolutionizes how you monitor, inspect, and manage your operations. With cutting-edge technology and expert operators, we deliver real-time data, detailed reports, and actionable insights for our valuable clients. Why risk the safety of your team or waste precious time? Our drones access even the most challenging areas with ease, reducing downtime and enhancing safety across your sites. We take the guesswork out of your projects by offering LiDAR, mapping, and inspection services so that your projects stay safe, on budget, and on time. Unmanned operator drone services, where technology meets safety, precision, and efficiency. Contact us today to elevate your operations. Yes.
And we're back. I hit the right buttons. You saw the ad. You heard the ad. You heard us again. Real fast, before we move on to some state stuff, there was a question that was asked in the comment section by Marie. In short, it was the mayor that resigned a good leader for Minot? And obviously, excluding the circumstances that led to the resignation, Tom Ross might not have been... you might not have agreed with him on every policy decision he made and everything he said, but I think Tom Ross loved Minot and loved promoting Minot, and he was a good voice for Minot. I
think that's a good characterization.
Yeah.
I think everybody would probably have their own opinion depending on what their expectations were. Did he have a bunch of set goals to go out and achieve? Was he out advocating? Was he doing those things? I look at the difference between what I did and what he did. I think it's very contrasting. But what he did, he got through it fine up until the point of
no
what
return.
Has us here.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think that answer to everybody's question of themselves is what was your expectations, and if those expectations weren't met, why?
Yeah.
So
obviously, I think those expectations weren't met because of how it ended. I think that's a
big piece.
Yeah.
Whoever then ends up in that position has to know that it is a 365 job, 24/7. The most that I ever did in terms of public chicanery,
for lack of a better term, yeah.
We had the roast, August 2020, where I think I sat on I sat on stage with a cigar and a little thing of scotch. And don't get me wrong, I took heat for that, but even with my counter on that, I kept my language clean. I kept it above board, and because I was the mayor.
Yep.
Now,
there's a sense of...
There's a lot more that I could have said and a lot deeper things that I could have gone to. Those who know me best know that. But when you're in that position,
yep, you
have to hold that 365.
Yep.
That's not a question.
There's the expectation that you have to be above the fray in that regard.
And I think that's where, if somebody does ask, with, like the Ross question, he was out in public a lot. Both in community events, but also doing things that probably led to why we're here. That's a personal choice. I think he could have probably done a little better job on the other part when he wasn't at City Hall.
Yeah, that's fair. So here's a separate but linked question. Should City of Minot officials, the mayor, city council, maybe some top executives of department heads or whatever, should they be issued and provided a phone from the city?
I think we're at that point, yeah.
I feel like that would be a fair thing at this stage.
The point that I think, even looking back when I was in office, I had a separate line on my phone. So when it would call in, it was calling into the mayor's number, so it wasn't my personal cell phone. But yeah, at this point in the day and age, get a simple smartphone that you can check your emails, that you can reply to text messages. It doesn't have to be make some phone calls on. That are specific only to city business.
Yeah.
And that would also help with open records requests.
100%.
So you're not drifting through all of the personal information.
And on the flip side of that too, if a personal phone were to become intertwined in some issue with that, that creates a whole nother issue in and of itself on that end. So in theory, everything could be done strictly through that public phone, I guess, for lack of better terms.
I think that's probably an easy answer of just yes, do it. It's not a tremendous amount of money, and this is again coming from the side of fiscal responsibility, but responsibility though to the elected official, to the public, and the public to the official of, when I first got on council, we were issued these iPads that were quite old, didn't hold a charge. And I really didn't even use mine because it just wasn't functional, especially replying to emails, trying to tap a screen.
It wasn't very responsive.
Yeah. So I ended up actually getting a computer from IT when I was in office, and that I used it only for the city business. I think the same should be for phones.
I think that's fair at this stage, especially in light of everything that happened.
And the amount of responsibility that the council members themselves have more responsibility than they had before, obviously. So I think it would be reasonable.
Yep. And plus, it just acts as a helpful barrier between personal and public life there, too. Yeah. So I think that's pretty well hashed out on that one. Want to start moving into some state topics?
Absolutely.
Let's talk flood control, huh? I guess it's a good transition. It's not fully state, it's not fully city.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's some big talks going on at the state legislature of how funding is going to come down and be presented going forward. There's a big variation in numbers for, obviously we requested, I think 120 or 125, and that's the high end. That's if everything was perfect, the number we would get. But right now it's sounding like it's more likely that we're going to get closer to about the 65 million range.
Yep. So the initial point, and we're talking about House Bill 1020.
Yeah, 1020.
1020. House Bill 1020 was the big effort, and that was something that, I'm not going to keep dialing back to, but we had moved as a community to speed up flood control because just the amount of time it was going to take and the associated inflationary costs and then flood insurance costs, all of that compiled in. We needed to get it done quicker. On the side, too, that we wanted to actually get flood protection done. It's not just about the money, but protection itself, that whole issue of, life, health, and property.
Yeah.
So that was the big move, and over the last couple of sessions, that has been a priority. And it looked like this session, when we were asking for $122 million in House Bill 1020, things were really moving in a good direction. However, if we take a look at the price of sweet crude oil today, and that is the indicative factor because that's where the revenues come from, the oil extraction tax, and dumps into the different buckets. The State Water Resource Fund, oil prices have been down, so they're looking at the projected forecast and saying, well, they're not nearly as rosy as they were when the session started. So we're looking at dialing back to that $68 million, which was the original intent language from before. So we're not going backwards. We're just not taking any step forward in speeding things up. And that heavily involves MI4, which is going to be the Maple Diversion right down by the old City Hall, the library.
Just west of the library and everything there.
North of, west,
and
north, and east.
And a little, it's all around,
The old Lincoln School area. That's
exactly.
the easiest way for folks maybe. So that project itself, I mean, is heavily vested within the federal and the state and the local cost shares, and could take anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And I say 5 years because their number is 3 to 4. Inflationary costs, we don't know what they're going to do. We would like to see those move forward.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have seen those hit harder than maybe initially expected over the past few years as well.
And that was a big reason on why we wanted to step things up and move them faster, because like when Alderman Fuller was having it out about, not wanting to accept these bids because of the inflationary costs, this is what happens when we wait. This is what happens when we don't move things faster. The costs go higher. Now, there's limitations. We're paying this through a portion of our sales tax locally. Obviously, there's limitations at the state level through what's available. Now, granted, they did do some maneuvering, some very good, I think, genuine efforts in allowing the state to bond some of those dollars and push more money forward, but you still have to have the dollars backing there. So I'm hopeful that things even out a little bit more and we can maybe push a little more funding, but I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the day to see $68 million being that number on 1020. It would be very unfortunate. Minot took a back seat, and I will once again look at the camera and say I was sitting there when then Governor Burgum walked in and kind of took over that 2020 session and saying Fargo needs to come first. Minot, you're going to take a back seat. We took our back seat.
And we're waiting. We're still having to take that back seat.
We still have only 5,000 CFS flood protection through our community right now. That's truly why we're doing this, not just on the other aspects, but we've made a commitment. We continue to make those sacrifices, those sales tax dollars, like Alderman Fuller and all of us have said, that's a lot of money going into a single entity.
Like no one's debating that portion of it.
That this community absolutely could be using in other places. However, this is a priority one. So it would be really great if we could figure out, and we learned from history. The last time around when we took a look at those forecasts, long-term forecasts for crude oil, if you remember, we did that in 2018 and again in 2020.
Okay.
Both times that happened, those forecasts were, let's call it ultra-conservative, and we ended up with a huge budget surplus.
Ended up being a lot more than anticipated.
Now, granted, yes, conservative budget forecasting is probably responsible forecasting.
Exactly.
However, we should learn and also watch what's going on in Washington. I don't think that the president is going to just watch crude oil diminish pricing, knowing how that has an effect on the economy. I think a better holistic view and then taking a look at the last forecasts when we did this on how those played out. That might be an incentive if any of the legislators are watching to take a look at those forecasts and say, we see what you're saying here. However, maybe we can be a little more realistic.
A little more proactive in pushing Minot to the forefront of the agenda. Obviously, being the legislators from Minot, that's part of what they have to do. They have to make compromise and, obviously make it work in the end, but prioritizing Minot and getting us front and center to expedite this process as much as possible it would be huge right now. I mean, it's something that Minot has spent we're almost 15 years out from the flood now. We're going to be 14 this year. And it's been a lot of money that's been spent, a lot of time, and we still have a lot of time to go on it. But obviously you can only have so much done in a year, but to be able to expedite the process would be beneficial for Minot.
And there's another component that plays into this. If we use our budget forecasting saying ultra conservative, like we are looking at with 1020, that has the ripple effect too. If we have that ultra conservative forecast and we end up with a $500 or $600 million surplus, again, now we're also tying that into the discussion of are we doing enough for property tax relief? It's more holistic than just one issue. And I think that they also need to be mindful of that. Obviously, we don't want to go into deficit because we also saw that in 17 where they were pulling reserves and draining the reserve buckets. So I get that it's not an easy thing to factor in.
Undoubtedly.
But I think that we take a look at the more times that the state has been ultra conservative. Maybe we only need to be ultra, not ultra.
Fair. And when we have a Republican supermajority, they lean towards that ultra conservative side of it, and it's part of that game that's played in Bismarck at this point.
They should keep in mind too. And I'd be more than happy to go into the whole property tax debate and why I think it's important to have local skin in the game. But if we end up with a $600 million surplus again at the state, in 5 years, there's going to be a petition circulating again to abolish property taxes. And then that whole discussion again starts at the state level. That's probably a whole show in itself again on property taxes.
We've had a couple, but we can definitely touch on that here in a minute for sure. But before we jump all the way into that, just a quick background question that I probably should know. But originally, when flood control started, what were the estimates for how long it was going to take in Minot this time around? Roughly.
So when they initially began, there really was no definitive timeline that was set out. The reason for that is because it wasn't just Minot, it was the Mouse River
area
flood protection project. So we had all of our partners up and down the line, not knowing exactly how all of that was going to play out. I remember, when this first launched in 2012, the discussions down at the legislature with Mr. Striley, or at that time Representative Striley and Karen Krebsbach and all of these folks, and they wanted to get X amount of dollars dedicated to Minot, which was at that time a lot of money. However, there was never a time frame. At that point, it was a funding time frame of X amount of dollars, but not project time frame. There was talk at one point of 20-year construction window, but it was never really, here's what our...
Nothing was ever set in stone.
It was never set in stone. And as we move forward, that's where, when we really got into the brass tacks and we wanted to shorten up or get more money in that original window that was discussed, and that was right in that 2017, just coming into that session. We really put the hard tack into, we need a time frame, we need an overall construction plan. Now, if you talk to the engineers, they would probably say, yep, it was a 22-year build window, but it was never set in the legislature. Here's what our build window is. Now, talking with some of our representatives, or let's call it some of the folks from Minot who are very in tune to what's going down at the legislature, and some of the people within the city, the inflationary costs have messed things up big time. We talked about this.
For a fact,
It's unfortunately reset a time frame for completion. We're back to a 20-year because of inflationary costs.
We're restarting almost that 20 year.
We're restarting into a 20-year. That means 20 years from this year out. And
that puts us,
holy cow,
35 years out from the flood at that stage. Effectively.
People looked at Grand Forks, and they were just officially wrapping up their flood control in 2011.
Like right prior to our flood is when they had finished their flood control.
15, 16 years past that point. And of course, you don't start flood control, but literally the day the water goes down.
Exactly.
So take some time off that. Different scenario entirely. That was almost entirely federally funded because there weren't any other natural disasters that year. And President Clinton came in and...
how come Grand Forks got a president to visit and Minot didn't?
Oh, you're just poking the bear now.
You don't have to touch that one, but I think a lot of people have thought about that.
That pisses me off. Obama didn't show up, flat out.
He went everywhere else that summer.
State, he didn't show up. He sent one of his secretaries. I still remember sitting at that press conference right by City Hall on the levee system, overlooking the CP, then just CP rail tracks and the Lincoln area, everything flooded behind. And I was ticked. We're not good enough to get, at that point, the president here when he'd been to just about every other natural disaster, but we weren't good enough. And that held through. I think that's a touch point on me. I'm still not happy about it.
Well, it's understandably so, because I remember there were rumors at the time that he was going to do a big thing at Jim Hill or something and land in a helicopter. And obviously that never happened. And now...
No, we were just North Dakota. He was too busy doing his thing, golfing, I think, is what he was doing actually the day that press conference happened. He was golfing.
Even better then, huh?
Yeah.
Gosh, gotta love that one.
Oh.
But hey, you guys
got my blood pressure.
When we had a conversation with Tom Schrader a couple weeks back, he did mention you guys made it into the White House on TV.
Yeah,
it sounded like. So it's not like they didn't know about it.
No, they dang well knew about it. I mean, he'd sent the Homeland Security Secretary here to basically say, don't plan on any extra help. From what FEMA had already said, we're not going to have a heck of a lot other than trailers and things like that. So, great job. Appreciate that.
Federal government coming in clutching that one there. Anyways, though, off of that, yes. Any further takes you have on the flood control project? Do you think it would be beneficial to have a finalized timeline set into legislation?
I think we do need to get that locked in. I think we need to get a funding priority mechanism that says we're going to finish it in X amount of years. And the challenge is always, can the local keep up with the local cost share side? I think that can be built into the bonding through the Bank of North Dakota, even for our local side, using the earnings off of the legacy fund itself. I know that gets contentious down in Bismarck, but we need to get a time frame on this, and it needs to be less than 20 years at this point. Yeah. We can't be 30 years past this point. If we learn from history, Minot floods, we did the 40th year anniversary in 2009 of the 69 flood. Yep. We were just coming into...
And there was some really tough stuff in the 70s, too, that happened, if I remember
72,
right.
74, and
exactly.
76.
Yeah.
We fought floods. So, granted, weather is cyclical and cycles are cyclical, but we're going to need this at some point.
Yeah.
And we need to get our time frames, and we need to get these projects built. But more so because we also have people down the line that we've still got houses to buy. Yeah. We've still got neighborhoods like the pool that are going to take interruption 20 years down the road. How many new people have come into mind and have no clue what happened in 2011?
How many people at this stage are going to start buying houses that weren't even alive during the flood at that point?
It's tough to sell somebody on the idea of flood control when they've lived here for 13 years. The scars are gone, but we're still tearing up Riverside and moving homes and tearing down homes. The longer we get away from the actual flood, the harder it is going to be to keep that I think momentum within the community to say this is a priority.
Well, yeah, I feel that directly. We lived a block away from Lincoln School. I mean, we lost the house in the flood, and at this point, not directly affects me anymore. I want to see it get done. But objectively, I understand that this is something that is bigger than just that. We have to finish the whole thing, or at least, maybe you could find a rework to get it done a little bit more efficiently, but it's something that needs to be completed. You can't just walk away from it at this point.
And like I had pointed out to Alderman Fuller when he challenged me at that council meeting, do we not remember they cut the city in half? I mean, granted, yes, we've got a few more services on North Hill now, but it disrupted the entire city.
The 83 bypass is a little bit better than it was then, too.
Very true.
Got 4 lanes at least.
We still have to get 52 raised at some point. That was underwater, but it directly affected every single person in Minot. And for the people who weren't here, to say I don't live in the valley, now it does affect you. Yeah, it really does.
It does. It might not affect your home, but the whole rest of the services in Minot for a month were shot at that point.
We had a boil order in place. We had traffic.
Alan Walter.
Boil the damn water, Alan. Yep, I remember it. Yep. I've got the shirt. Actually, no, I don't have the shirt. I sacrificed my shirt to the quilt that's hanging at City Hall.
There you go. Okay, fair.
Yeah. But that's my intake is we need to keep the momentum going forward. We need to get that time frame. But we also need to remember why it's a priority and continue to tout that. For people who weren't here, it's important to know.
Undoubtedly so. And that if you want to get into this before we jump off here, we can kind of touch on property taxes a little bit. Sure. And the massive debate that obviously when you were here last spring, Measure 4 was getting into the ball game and it was starting to get rolling. Obviously that got shut down, and so Governor Armstrong came into this session full bore. He wanted to get tax reform done. How do you think that process has been going so far?
There's so many right ideas down at the legislature and so many wrong ideas all at the same time.
Doesn't help when you have 50 some bills for tax reform go forward. I mean,
that is the perfect hitting the nail on the head right there. So something has to be done. And I don't mean that is something has to be done because of everything, all the rhetoric and everything else like that. It has to be done because otherwise something really bad is going to be done. Sure. And then it'll take even longer to undo it. I think that there is a tremendous opportunity because of a lot of our state resources to take a lot of that burden off of the local side, whether that's the school or the county or even some of the city portions of that. We do need to reform on how the assessments go. That really hasn't been touched on. That we have to be within that 90 to 92% of the actual resale value, and that's where the assessments come out. Just on the news this morning, there was talk that the assessments in Minot, the valuations are going up because the sales numbers keep climbing. That's tied to inflationary costs. However, it's that chicken and the egg thing. We should probably head that off at the state level and maybe dial that back to here's what we're going to cap that number at or percentage at. I think that there would be an opportunity to address the issue of people who are retired, fixed income folks, once they hit age 65 in their primary home, where they have to live in Minot for the majority of the time, that their property taxes are froze and will forever pay that as long as they are living at that house. Now, if they go into assisted living, that changes.
Exactly.
But
move to Arizona,
the rest is subsidized through revenues that are now locked in within the state. I think that would be an easy get to say, well, you never truly own your home. You do own your home, but you also pay for the fire and the police and the roads and all of the infrastructure around your home. I think that skin in the game is important. I just have a fundamental problem going to anyone and saying, you need to pay for my services. And what we're saying is to the oil and everything else. Now, some of the ideas with the legacy fund is someday, perhaps when there is enough money in there, it will pay for all of that out of that big pool of money. But for the time being, it's not there. So what we're saying is we need for somebody else to pay for all of our services that I demand to have as a citizen, as a community member. Skin in the game is important because it also holds the line on local spending. Responsibility to that spending. Is our money being spent the best that it can be spent?
And to further that, is it the state's responsibility to make sure that local municipalities are spending responsibly, or is that the local voters' job to make sure that they're
supposed to be the local voters' job? But I guess 88% of Minot doesn't care enough to vote again. Take that shot again. I'll take it every time. It's supposed to be the local responsibility to that. Understand though that Minot and the rest of the North Dakota cities are not unique in the sense that when our infrastructure was put in anywhere from the early 1900s forward, there was no true plan to maintain that infrastructure. And we're talking about water and sewer lines and things like that. Roads, that's literally at the surface. They tend to get taken care of quicker. But when you have lead line pipes, and let's even use a small community around, I won't name a name, but do they have a plan to replace their lead line pipes? No, they don't, because they don't have the base of taxpayers to be able to do
make something like that happen.
So part of that might be at the state level, where a plan is developed long term to start tasking this really old infrastructure forward. The problem is who gets the first crack at that.
Exactly. Who gets priority?
That's a fight that they can have at the legislature. But we need to address our infrastructure, and until we do, this issue over here is just going to be continuing, because we've seen how many water pipe breaks that we've had every time the frost dives past 7 feet in Minot. That happens
every couple of weeks. You see it in the Minot Facebook page posting, and it's always a quick fix. It's something that they can do relatively easily, but the fact that it happens as frequently as it does, it's noticeable.
Absolutely. And a couple of seasons ago, they identified a section west of my house, probably about 6-7 blocks. There were so many patches in there was hardly any original pipe, but what original pipe just kept breaking, so they had to go in and do all of it. And it wasn't on the CIP plan to address that, but it just popped up there because it was shot.
And it needs to happen. It's one of those things. It has to be done.
So there's a lot of different parts. You have the evaluations, you have the local, let's call it responsibility for spending, and then you also have just the facet of where that money is going to come from, and all of it needs to come together.
So obviously with this big, we're talking about House Bill 1176. There's still a couple others that are out there, Lausers and Weiss's, but 76 is the one that has and still continues to get the biggest headlines. Obviously the tax credit for the primary residence, I think everyone's probably all on board with that. No one's going to argue that. But do the caps on the cities, is that true reform, or is that just putting a Band-Aid on the solution?
It's a Band-Aid on the solution because we're not addressing all of the other issues that we just talked about. It is a Band-Aid. What it will guarantee is that we will see a 3% increase every year in some form or fashion. Now, for some people, okay, that's the limitations that they can accept.
And maybe for a place like a Granville or a Surrey, that's not a huge issue for something like that.
No,
but
that's by no means. The challenge I work in the insurance industry. The challenge that we're seeing now, like with Inflation Guard, that's an insurance area. But as the values get higher, that 3% means more.
Sure.
A lot more.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing with the inflationary costs and the valuations of homes, now this translates right over into what we're talking about in property values. I mean, when I bought my house in 2005, I paid $169,000 for my house, which was, by the way, a lot.
Yeah, at that point, yeah.
And at least for me.
Yeah, I mean,
we were paycheck to paycheck broke type thing, and, we made that commitment. $179,000 doesn't buy hardly anything anymore.
Tell me about it. I understand that.
20 years forward. So,
but there's no new homes being built on top of that, and there's a plethora of reasons that we could take a whole podcast.
There are some, but not very, very few.
Sure,
very few. I was just up actually. I do a lot of driving around town. There are some houses being built, but you probably count them on one or two hands.
Exactly,
which isn't a lot. But that same house now, I truly don't know. I'm in the valley. I don't know what my house would sell for, but I do know what it would cost to rebuild, and that's just right around $389,000.
Yeah.
So take that 3%. If they're taxing my house at $300 right now, that 3% gets bigger and bigger and bigger quicker.
Yeah.
So with that 3% increase, it sounds really good, but as the valuations get higher, those numbers go up quite a bit. So now that's a cap. And not everybody's going to take that, because we still have that responsibility. We're electing local leaders, and we don't want to pay more than we absolutely have to.
And there's an out in it where local election can be held to pause the cap for however many years. And so to give it credit, that is in there. But
the long answer to your short question, it's a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
You're right. It's not addressing some of the other issues that I think we need to. And more so, I do think that important component of that is the fixed income households. That if you hit age 65 and if you own a home and this is your primary home, you're the one who lives there, not all your kids that's in your mom or dad's name.
Yep.
I think that there would be an opportunity to capture an easy win. It's part of the solution. It's not the whole solution.
Yeah. And unfortunately, at this point, it's far too into the game for any of that to probably likely come to the surface. It's just something's going to happen. Something's going to pass at this point. It's just what molding of the plans is going to come together and what extent are they going to end up putting out there.
Yeah, it's going to be a multi-year fix on this one. I think that that's what Governor Armstrong even saw.
Yeah.
Some of our legislators saw. And because there's so many different ideas out there, there's no perfect solution to this. Because if you were to just say, okay, the state's 100% going to take care of that, we heard from a lot of legislators then, the money's going to come from somewhere.
Yep.
And does it do our vehicle registrations now, instead of being $100 now, are they $1,200? Gas tax, we're going to start seeing that.
It's already talking
it's
about
already
getting
being
raised.
talked about higher, but
it will at that point.
Go from there as well, along with a lot of other fees and things like that. The money's going to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
How can we find to do it equitably, fiscally responsibly, and not only that, but sustainable? Sustainable. So you're not just completely draining the legacy fund, and you're not completely. The premise of the legacy fund was to be there forever. Forever. It's going to be the revenues that feed into our general. So exactly, like I said, maybe someday that opportunity is there to take over the property tax side of things. But we also better have a plan to deal with all the infrastructure and everything else that always seems to come along with it. It's a constant struggle. And I got one more thing before we kind of head out that just came to me here. Thing that's going to be on the ballot next fall is an extension to the term limits that was voted on in 2022, I believe, that fall. And now the state legislature is sending that back to the ballot this next fall. Yeah, what do you think on that? I wasn't in favor originally of the way it was designed for term limits, because I took a look at a lot of the institutional knowledge that was built in with some of the longstanding legislators who had done a tremendous amount of work. I will use our local Karen Krebsbach as an example of that. She did a lot of great things for the community. I worked with Senator Rich Wardner out of Dickinson on our flood control stuff, and the man knew the funding mechanisms through the state, the revenues from the state like nobody's business, and he was the one who crafted Prairie Dog and Prairie Dog 2. All of that is out the window. with the term limit idea. Now I get where you're also where folks are coming from and saying, we don't want people serving forever. Well, they're part-time politicians to begin with. They're legislators. We have seen a tremendous amount of turnover in the House. I guess I haven't seen what the Senate side is. There's quite a bit of turnover. At the end of the day, too, term limits mean that if I want to vote somebody in, but they're timing out, you're taking my vote away from me.
Yeah.
So I was never a fan of it, in favor of it. However, it did pass. I think at this point, I think the voters should figure it out from here.
Yeah, and on that same point, it sounds like on next ballot, there's going to also be that 60% constitutional threshold will be coming to the ballot again. So we'll have that to vote on as well next fall.
I think if a lot of the people that said we don't want career politicians, we're also going to need people to step up.
Yeah, that's the flip side.
This goes back to this very first discussion we had about mob mentality.
Yeah,
we're going to vote, we're going to scream, we're going to yell, but do we have a plan? Do we have somebody who's going to be stepping forward?
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Better have a plan.
That's state legislative politics. That's not fun.
And once you get into that level, and I even told this to some of those very first legislators that were voted in 18 when I came into office. Yep. I'd spent time down in the legislature. It takes a full session to even get really a true understanding of what's going on. So then you got one more under the current paradigm to try to get something done, and then you're done.
Yeah, then it's over.
With that side. Maybe you can go over to the other side of the aisle, the House or Senate, whichever, back and forth. Yeah. But that's a whole different game, and I think people that have never been down in the legislature should spend a day.
Yeah, gosh, just watching it from afar
sit through some of those committee hearings, sit into the sessions. It's educational.
It is undoubtedly
confusing. If you've never been there, but very educational.
It's for someone that enjoys niche things. It's very entertaining. But
that is true.
But for the general people, it's a big learning curve.
Yep.
I mean,
absolutely. And it's also a tremendous commitment. Think about that. And I've had people that had asked me once I was done being mayor, run for District 40.
Hey.
And I can't commit 4 months away from work. So there's another aspect.
Do you think it's necessary at this point? We talked about, modernizing things. Is this a thing where North Dakota should move to a yearly legislature for a smaller time frame?
I really hate to say that.
Yeah.
I would really hate to see that. I like the citizen side of it. It does take a commitment. I just personally, I just got through with my other commitment where
you're still
a lot of times I was still in recovery mode, still am, but it is limiting, but if somebody's truly passionate, and that's where it comes down to, we're eliminating people that one may have that passion to serve for longer periods of time, and they've got the time. Again, it comes down to if you're voting for something, have the whole worldly aspect and understanding of what it is, not only tomorrow, but long term. Yeah,
and unfortunately, we're sitting at a point now where we'll see what happens.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. The only thing that we can do now is get out and vote.
That's it, because it's happening. Some late July, early August, we will have a special, and on top of that, June, we have a sales tax election for. So it's going to be a
election summer.
Unexpectedly so.
We're not going to be at Roosevelt Pool, so we might as well go out and vote.
You're darn right. There you go. Any final words? Anything you want to end on here, Shaun, before we call it?
I appreciate the opportunity to be here again. Appreciate the Dakotan for what they're doing and following the different aspects.
Thank you.
Yourself, and of course, just get back out and vote. I don't want to see, as a community member, I don't want to see a 12% turnout. It's almost shameful. It is shameful. We need to be a lot more as a community involved with our local decision making. That means showing up at the polls and casting your ballot and doing your research on the candidates. First and foremost.
And we will have all of those interviews here, so long as the candidates expect. They will be here. So thank you, Shaun, for coming on. We appreciate your support. We appreciate everything you do. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for watching. We appreciate every view that we get from you. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, drop a
follow.
Yes, follow on Facebook, all of the things. If you love what we're doing, let us know. If you hate what we're doing, let us know. Leave it all down in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching, and